Hi, my name is Russell Shorto. I am an American author of nonfiction historical narratives. I've written 7 books. This one, because it's a family story, was very different. It's also different because it's within living memory. So I was interviewing my parents, aunts and uncles, other people in the town. The book is about my grandfather who ran the, I guess you would say, the maffia franchise in my hometown. And I've learned, among many very personal family stories, I learned that the mafia, as it developed in America, it had its big headquarters in New York and in Chicago and Philadelphia, but it was all over the country in medium and small cities. And they were connected, and the leaders of the American mob, they were very much, when they came, very much discriminated against because they were Italian, because they were Catholic, and they kind of protected themselves and created their own networks, and they really admired American capitalism, American companies and the leaders of them like Henry Ford and Frick and Carnegie and so they set up an operation that really mirrored that, and they began in New York and Philadelphia from there, sending out people who were loyal to open branch offices. And one of those people became my great uncle. So he moved to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, that's my hometown, and he fell in love with a girl who happened to be the sister of my grandfather. Now, my grandfather had grown up kind of on the streets. He became a very skilled, not just a gambler, but a cheat. He was a really good cheat at cards and dice, and he knew the whole town at the street level. So here comes this other man from Philadelphia with this mission to open up kind of mob franchise, and they joined forces. They became family, and they opened a storefront on Main Street in town, and it was 2 doors from City Hall, so from there they could easily, the mayor could come in and they could pay him off and give him a little envelope with money and pay off the police. It was called City Cigar. In the front was a cigar store, and then there was a door in the back of that, and you walked through that door and it was a pool hall. And then upstairs were offices, and they ran all their gambling operations from those offices. My family, nobody talked about this. It was kind of a thing that everybody knew and nobody talked about. And I somehow knew it as a child, even though nobody talked about it. So, yeah, you just heard little conversations or something. So, and I knew I had this kind of really dark, not quite fear, but there's just dark feelings about my grandfather. I was around him a little bit whenever I was young, not much, so you just absorb what the feelings of the adults are. So I knew he was involved in what I guess I knew at the time was mob operations, but I didn't know what that meant, didn't know what the extent of it was. Once in a while people would talk about things like pinball machines, and I remember in my grandparents' basement there was like it was like a cage with dice in it and a handle, and so there were some things like that were, I knew, I felt like, looking back now, I think I was like being a little bit of a detective, where I was looking around their house and but I didn't want to know too much, I think, but there were clues. This kind of small town mob story is really a story of American immigration in the 20th century. So you had the generation that came, which would have been my grandfather's father and mother, came from Italy, from Sicily, to Pennsylvania. They worked in coal mines. He worked in a coal mine. And so millions came within a very short time to do work that Americans didn't want to do. So then suddenly there are these millions of new immigrants, kind of like recent history, and all these Americans are upset now that they're taking our jobs, and the real fear was that most of them were Catholics. They were Italian, they were Irish, and Americans thought of themselves as white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and they felt they were being invaded by the Catholic Church. So that forms this discrimination, and really harsh discrimination. Italians were paid less than blacks were in the early 20th century. they couldn't even get. In my town, the big industry was steel mills. Italians and blacks didn't work in the steel mills. So that's the one level. Then the next generation is what it was my grandfather's, and they kind of used that discrimination or channeled their energies to provide illegal services. First it was alcohol during Prohibition, when that was illegal for 10 years, and then in gambling. And everybody wanted to gamble, but it was illegal, so they provided this service. My book in English is called Small Time, A Story of My Family and the Mob. In Dutch it's called Paterfamilias. I have just signed copies that are at Scheltema, and they are here and will be during October, which is the History Month.